Good evening, good morning, good afternoon, wherever you may be. Welcome back to the Same Old Arsenal podcast, bonus edition. A special one for you this evening. Some high-profile guests. And no, it's not Lee Judges. Good afternoon to everyone in the chat box. Good evening, welcome. Get your comments in there. Keep them clean. Otherwise, Nigel will have you out of there.
Do your job, Nigel.
Do your job, Nigel. He'll have you out of there, Nigel, our moderator. He'll sling you out. So, tonight, a podcast about, is Stan Kroneke really to blame for everything that's going wrong financially, that seems to be going wrong financially at Arsenal, with no big investment and things like that. Let's introduce the guests first. Obviously, a man who needs no introduction. Mr. Judges, how are you, sir?
I'm very good, thank you very much, Craig. Really looking forward to this because this is. I'm going to be honest. I'm out of my comfort zone on this because I don't really know. I'm just looking at it from a fan's point of view, and I'm not happy. So, we'll leave it at that. And
this is it. Go. I mean, this is an education for me as well, and it's something like Kevin just said before we came on air. It's time we got down to the nitty gritty, and it's time we got educated about what is actually going on instead of just flying around the place shouting Kroneke out. Kevin Campbell, how are you, sir?
I'm very well, thanks. Craig,
did you have a nice? Oh no! Did you have a nice birthday?
To the nitty gritty, let's do it.
Did you have a nice birthday?
I had an absolutely fantastic birthday. Mr. Judges treated me very well on the Friday.
It's a week ago today. Can you believe that? It's a week ago.
Must be all that YouTube money we earn.
Well, you know what? He's a good lad, and he met my youngest boy, Kyle.
Yeah, met Kyle.
For the time, which was good.
And Kevin bought us a bottle of champagne. We had a lovely little champagne afternoon.
Sure. Here we go. I'll cut him off quickly because otherwise we'll be here for 20 minutes listening to that story. Joining us also, I have Danny, who writes. While I was doing a bit of research, I came across Danny's blog, Arsenal Truth, and it is a bloody good one. The link will be down below in the description for Danny's blog. You go over there and you can have a read of them yourselves and follow him on Twitter and all that malarkey. Danny, how are you, sir?
I'm very well, thanks. Thanks very much for inviting me today.
Absolutely. Our pleasure, mate. Anyone who comes on, it's our pleasure. And of course, a man who I would think would be familiar to most Arsenal fans. Got him on today, asked him if he'd come on today, and very graciously said yes. So I'm delighted to have on Mr. Tim Payton. How are you, sir?
I'm very well. Thank you for asking me on.
Absolutely. Again, our pleasure, as always. Okay, let's get to the nitty-gritty. I'm going to start with Danny's blog, and I'm just going to read out a few bits here, and I'll let Danny come in and talk about what he's written, and then obviously we'll ask Tim what his thoughts are on it. Okay, so it starts, why Kroneke cannot invest big money. The age-old debate we've heard ever since Stan Kroneke joined Arsenal as the owner, why doesn't he put his hand in his pocket and invest? This is usually accompanied by complaints that the wrong owner was brought into the club and that Usumov would have spent Arsenal back to competitiveness. Although history has proved time and time again that spending money alone is not the route to competitiveness, Man United and Leicester being the two sides of the counter coin, the plain fact is that ever since the Premier League have brought in short-term costs, which is, of course, aka financial fair play, Stan Kroneke would not have been able to invest super large sums of money in the players, even if he wanted to. Now, Dan, I'm going to
not quite true, but I'll let Dan go first.
Okay, no problem. Dan,
yeah,
I'll let you carry on there, mate.
Sure. Well, let me start by saying that first of all, I'm not here to defend Stan Kroneke.
No, absolutely not. Let's get that out. We'll get that out. We'll get that one out of there as well. I'm not defending him either.
Sure.
I just want, instead of seeing people going around the place, and no one's trying to score points here. This is a discussion between five men. So
sure. I mean, personally, I'm not in favour of the club having an owner who sees his investment as part of a conglomerate of sports franchises. I'd want the owner of Arsenal to be fully focused and invested in the present, and have some knowledge of football as well as Arsenal. And you have to wonder how effective or informed an owner can be if he doesn't fully understand the sport he's operating in, or what he's even seeing on the pitch. And but anyway, he placed that trust in Arsene Wenger and Ivan Gazidis. I mean, and I'm afraid to say they've done a job on him, really, because they sort of failed on practically every metric, both in terms of the football side, because obviously Arsenal have been in decline for around 10 years now, slow decline perhaps. But also in terms of transfer spend and contracts, they failed miserably on that side as well. And the legacy of that is that now the club is losing money hand over fist. And maybe we can talk later on about whether it's time for Kroneke to exit the club with his profits intact. So obviously Kroneke has to take the blame on that front. But we also have to accept that what's damaged Arsenal is not lack of spending, because I believe Kroneke has provided more than enough funds for Arsenal to be successful, even as far as challenging for the title and the Champions League. The problem is his lack of knowledge of the sport and his trust in a board and manager that unfortunately proved to be incompetent, especially towards the end of their reign. So lack of funds is not sufficient reason to base our criticisms on Stan Kroneke. The real reason is, should Arsenal have done better with the money Kroneke gave us to spend? And there's plenty of evidence to suggest they should have.
Absolutely. I mean, I can't, Lee. I mean, I bring you as a fan. You can't disagree that we've spent money poorly.
No, I don't. For one moment, I think that there has been money to spend, but it's been spent poorly. I go along with that. But 3 or 4 years ago, when we had so-called money, and when Leicester, the year that Leicester won the league, we ended up spending just 10 million on Petr Cech, when as a fan, we all watched the game. We knew we needed a holding midfield player. We needed to other areas, and we chose not to do it. And then you have Arsene Wenger saying that, well, I'm not prepared to spend this and that on that. And that is where the problems come, and it was allowed to go on. And from a fan's point of view, I don't know how other fans feel about it, but how I feel about it is when the Emirates is a cash cow. It seems to me like all this money going into it, and all of a sudden, 13 years, 14 years down the line, they're saying, "Oh, we can't afford this, we can't afford that. We've got to have loans, we've got to have this, we've got to have that." And what I look at it now, and from a fan's point of view, I look at it. When we left Highbury, I can rattle off 7 or 8 world-class players. Right, 13 years later at the Emirates now, I can't rattle off one. And that, as a fan, is not acceptable when for years they've told us to spend our money, which we have done, even under Arsene Wenger, spend our money as the highest prices of all. But at the end of the season, we will sell our best players, i.e. Van Persie, i.e. Fabregas, i.e. Adebayor, i.e. Toure. The list goes on and on and on, all through the set time. And now we come to now, and I have it on good authority that Arsenal have asked to go and play a game on a Monday night for TV revenue. What is going on? And that comes under the Kroneke watch, and that comes under his management of ownership. And it's basically not acceptable.
Tim, what would you say to, hearing what Dan said, and then obviously passing over to Lee as a fan? What is it with Kroneke, and what is it? What is he ever going to invest? Is he ever going to have the chance to put his money, to put his hand in his pocket and say, "There you go, boys, there you go and knock yourselves out"? Or is it a case of having to wait until players like Mesut Ozil have left, so the wages are freed, Aubameyang has left, Lacazette has left, and again watching our best players walk out?
Gosh, there's so much to cover here. I don't know. Maybe if I split it down a little bit. When you use the word invest, I think you have to separate out 2 things. One is spend what the club generates. That, invest what the club has made. And that's broadly how the Arsenal model works now. It's quite a lot of money. It's more money than 15 of the 20 clubs in the Premier League are spending. I would probably, if we went down that route, I'd probably agree with what's been said so far. It's a case that it hasn't been spent very well. We could come back to the poor governance, the poor decision-making around the expenditure. Then you get invest in a more strategic point of view, which is how you can put extra money into the club to make it stronger. That's probably where I disagree a little bit with what I've heard, although I've not read, in that there are ways that Stan Kroenke or an owner could invest in Arsenal that would completely comply, for instance, with FFP. And I'll give you a couple of them. One is that you have a rights issue. That's where other people put money in and are given equity in the club. That's what Usmanov proposed nearly 10 years ago and was turned down by Stan Kroenke and the board as it was at the time, probably because if they'd have accepted that, it would have meant diluting their own stake. Because if they don't put the money in, then obviously Usmanov takes some capital in Arsenal. So you take a strategic view about whether that would have been right or wrong, but there was a proposal on the table that would have capitalised Arsenal at a time when they were arguably much shorter of cash than now because of some cash flow issues around the stadium. Another way that you could invest is you would pay off Arsenal's debt. Now, this is something that might make your jaws drop. Do you realise that Arsenal are paying as much in interest on the Emirates as Spurs are paying on their stadium?
It doesn't surprise me, to be honest.
In a way, that's not necessarily a criticism of where Arsenal are. Yeah. Arsenal took out about £300 million in loans at an interest rate of 5.99%. Spurs took out about 500 million of loans. So Spurs have taken out quite a lot more money, but they're only paying 1.99% because interest rates have become a lot lower in the economy ever since the financial crash. But where that takes you to is if you were a strategic owner that to a certain extent cared about the club and were prepared to commit a bit of money, you'd pay off Arsenal's debt. You'd pay off the mortgage. Then you would free up the capital of probably between 20 and 25 million a year extra that could go into the club because you're not paying it in interest payments. And that wouldn't fall foul of any FFP rules because you're allowed to pay off your debt within FFP because it's not just pumping money in, it's paying off a structural debt. So there are certain things that you could say if you were an owner where you owned Arsenal with your heartstrings rather than with your financial kind of brain acumen, that's what you would do. But clearly he's not going to do that. I agree with the comments that are made so far. He invests in Arsenal actually as an investor. You might hear the Arsenal Supporters Trust often talk about custodians. You want a custodian to own Arsenal, not a financial investor. I met him several times early on when he bought in. He bought media rights. That's what Arsenal are. Arsenal are global media rights. That's where all the value is, and that's what he bought. One of the things that struck me from when he first spoke to me was he said, Tim, wait till Asia and Africa get satellite broadband. Because that, to him, was the explosion in what Arsenal is worth because the TV values go up. Now he's right. He first bought Arsenal shares at £8,000 a pop. You know, the recent valuation, what he paid to get the final lot, were £30,000 a pop because the TV values have tripled in the time that he's owned Arsenal. So Arsenal are making a lot more money, although as fans, we're probably not enjoying watching them so much. There's a lot there. I should pass back to a couple of you guys. There was another debate, though, which is that even if Arsenal do not spend what they do have very well, and I feel that comes down much more. It's not the end of the world to have an owner that lives in America, to have a distant owner. But if they do that, what they have to do is put really strong governance in place in London. Not a board that is 84 years old, 79 years old and 76 years old. Well, that is the ages of Arsenal's pre-board members. Kevin will know one of them very well, dear old Ken Fryer. Yeah. Still going. And I love Ken, and he's a great guy, but I'm not sure that at 84, Ken is still on the ball, you know, to hold Arsenal's management team to account. Anyway,
Tim, just a couple of Tim, just a question that's been popping up in the chat here now quite a lot is a lot of fans thought that the Emirates Stadium was paid off.
No.
So how long more? When will the mortgage finish on the Emirates Stadium? Do you know?
Oh, about 19 years to go, but I'd have to check with the financial experts. Yeah. I think it was 30 years. There's a long way to go, and we pay about 19 million every year out of our revenues as a mortgage on that. And it was a very long-term loan that was wrapped up in these bonds. Now, there is a penalty clause in paying off the loan because often you might find that with a mortgage on your house if you pay it off early. But again, if you were an owner that really wanted Arsenal to be as strong as possible, you'd swallow that and pay it off because it would make the club stronger year by year. And I wouldn't criticise them for this because at the time the deal was done, 5.99% wasn't a bad rate. But now, you get about 2% in the markets, and that's what Spurs got on their much bigger development. So actually it's costing Spurs less to run their new stadium, and it's costing Arsenal to run ours if you include.
That's madness, isn't that? That's cool. It's absolute madness. Kevin, I saw you shaking your head there when Tim touched on the TV rights in India and Asia and around there.
Craig, I shake my head because this is what Arsenal's become. This is what Arsenal's become. If we go back to where, obviously leaving Highbury and going to the Emirates, that was the change. Now, what was the plan? Because there has to be a plan in place. Whichever way you look at it, if you're getting a new owner, there has to be some sort of plan in place how the club is going to sustain not only off the pitch, but most importantly on the pitch. Because if the team is successful on the pitch, it's going to generate more money off the pitch. But there doesn't seem to be a plan. It seems like the people at the top, all they wanted to do was make a lot of money. We've seen the team decline, and if we're honest, over a 10, 12, 14-year period. We've seen it slowly declining. People have been going crazy because we've seen problems with the team that ain't being addressed, never get addressed. And now we are where we are. We're 10th in the Premier League, and we're not 10th for no reason. We're 10th because we haven't got a strong enough playing staff. Whichever way we look at it, we're not strong enough. There's no actual plan from the owner who could have refinanced that loan. Even if he didn't want to pay it off. If the markets are saying it's 2% now, he could have refinanced them and made it a lot cheaper to create more opportunity to buy players. But they don't do that. Why don't they do that? Because they're milking it. They're milking it so much. And the fans are paying their money, and there's no way out now. Stan Kroenke now can't go and inject 200, 300 million into the club just like that because of FFP. He would have had to plan that years ago. And this is why I shake my head, because it's so frustrating being an Arsenal fan. And we've been here watching them do it, powerless, and now we're in this predicament. Who knows what's going to happen?
Dan, I want to come to you now. I got this from another blog that I've been reading today, and this is actually an answer from one of the blogs, and he goes on to say, why on earth would Stan Kroenke want to milk Arsenal for KSE? The Los Angeles Rams is the best positioned short-term sports business and long-term investments among sports teams and clubs worldwide. The Rams are worth more than Arsenal. Forbes ranked the Rams as the 14th most valuable team globally at $3 billion, whereas Arsenal ranked 39th at $2.4 billion. It goes on to say that I believe that the Rams this is why I've got people on like you. Are the Rams? Are the Rams government funded?
I don't know. To be honest, I don't know too much about Kroenke's other investments in America. Okay. That's not something I've personally done a lot of research on.
A lot of the NFL stadiums are government funded, but I don't know about the new one that they're building in LA, although it is the stadium penciled in to stage the Olympics in 2028. But whether or not there is local government finance, that is the common model. It's one of the reasons the NFL franchises move cities. The cities pay for the brand new stadium for them. Yeah. It's not the perfect model to compare. With over here. It's so different.
Granted,
over there also, of course, it's all fixed. You know, the worst franchise gets the best player the next season. Yeah, because they've kind of almost agreed that they'll go on a cycle of being good and bad, so everyone's interested. It's not the perfect comparison to make.
Okay, well, I stand corrected. So then, Dan, we've got this sponsorship deal now from Adidas. Now, how will that fare at Arsenal now with this shirt deal?
Well, I believe it's around 60 million a year.
No, that's too high.
Oh, okay. Well, and Puma was 30 million. I believe it's an extra 35 million a year over the course of the deal, but I could be wrong in that.
So what does that mean? If we get an extra 35 million from Adidas, then where's that money going to go?
Well, Mesut Ozil's salary at the moment. The deal, but the new deal is definitely an uplift. The figure that was quoted, I think, is a little bit high, but also increasingly these deals are bonus led. So I think that Arsenal might just about earn that amount of money if they win the Champions League, the Premier League, the FA Cup, and everything else going. You're probably looking at a benchmark payment of about 45 to 50 million. One of the things that last year, you saw that Arsenal's commercial revenue actually fell. You think, well, how is it falling, given year after year, bigger deals are coming in? It's because the bonuses that are in there for coming into the Champions League aren't paid. Although increasingly the players now have contracts that give them bonuses for getting into the Champions League. It's why, if you watch the Arsenal team carefully, the game they celebrated most all season a few years ago was that Champions League playoff game, because it all meant they were getting about 10% more over the season. And if you want a funny aside, Spurs really screwed this up one year when they wrote a bonus for coming top four, and then top four didn't actually mean Champions League, if you remember that. So they had to rewrite the contracts. But yeah. Maybe I've slightly distracted you, because the Adidas and the renewal with Emirates and so on does mean that Arsenal have a commercial income, financial uplift coming from this season, from next season. Okay,
Lee. Look, the ball is rolling. Lee? Have you got any questions for Tim while he's here?
Yeah, well,
fire them in.
I'm interested to know a couple of things. Is the Adidas deal? It doesn't matter how many shirts Arsenal sell.
No,
it's about the bonus. So it doesn't affect you if you go and buy 2 shirts or 3 shirts.
The only way, if you want to help Arsenal out, when you buy your shirt, buy it through Arsenal.com or in an Arsenal shop, because then they make the retailer profit. But but that's actually as being a shopkeeper, that what they tend to do on the shirt deals is Adidas buy out Arsenal, so they almost buy out the license to sell the shirts, and they take the risk on how many they'll sell. So it's not true that if everybody went and bought 10 and stuffed their wardrobes full of them, Arsenal would make more money. It's not calculated like that. It's it's all grossed into the overall.
Basically, they pay up front, don't they?
Yeah,
they pay a lump up front.
And they take the risk on how many they will sell. And if they sell lots, Adidas make a bit more money. And if they don't sell any, then that's their problem. Probably where that hits Arsenal is next time a renewal comes up and the marketplace says, well, you're worth less because we know your shirts don't sell as well.
So okay, that's fine there. The other thing that a lot of people have been asking is about, we've got not a lot of money in the transfer. We're still paying out a lot of money for agents, and 2 in particular are getting lots of these sweeteners and things like that. What if we're not? So who is actually getting the profit? From that, where's that money coming from?
Well, I
think
football agents is the biggest scourge, the biggest bunch of scumbags around football at the moment. The amount of money that is taken out and the lack of accountability and rules in how it's done. That's not something, to be fair, that Arsenal can address in their own. That has to be a football-wide solution, because you can't have Arsenal saying, well, we won't use any agents because then we won't get any good players. It's kind of like, it's a circular, you've got to suck with the devil. What you need is FIFA and the FA to bring in like rules and regulations. To come back to your narrower point, what would worry me is what governance arrangements do Arsenal have in place to make sure that money isn't going in the wrong direction? I mean, what other business in the world would let an agent represent the club and represent the player at the same time? I mean, talk about conflict of interest. Talk about, when you buy your house or you do a deal with your contract at work, you get your own lawyer or your own agent or advisor to look after what you're doing. If they're the person that's advising the person you're doing the contract with, you're a bit suspicious, aren't you, about who's getting done over or what the advice is going to be. And yet in football, it works like that all the time. I guess though that if you want to buy good players, you've got to deal with the agents. So the real important decision is who is making sure that Arsenal are working with the agents in a way that benefits the club and doesn't benefit the agents and the individual who is promoting them. And I'm probably getting old and grumpy, but I really don't like it when I look at the Arsenal directors box and I now see agents sitting in the box itself. You know, they've got a role in the game, but sitting in the box alongside our director of football doesn't
totally
smell
agree.
right to me.
Yeah, the other question is... Sorry, Kev, go on.
The game's changed. The game's changed. We're probably we're older than a lot of these youngsters who are coming up now. The game has changed beyond belief, and we better get used to it because this is the way it's going. Listen, this has all changed from when the clubs were the greedy ones at the start. When they left the Football League and went to the Premier League, everybody didn't realise what was going on. They knew what was going on. And from that, it's all about money, 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 money. So you lose that contact, you lose that togetherness, that cohesion through players and fan. And the players and fan have never been further away now.
Yeah,
never
I
been
agree.
further
Yeah,
away.
absolutely. Yeah, dead right.
We very soon we will see the first set of figures because the clubs now have to publish once a year their agent fees, although they only publish the gross figure. So if you've signed 5 players, you get it all added together. So it's hard to tell out what's going on. I will guess that the value of agent fees in the last year for Arsenal, you ask where that Adidas money is coming, I will guess it won't be that far off that kind of sum.
Dan,
the other thing is, Tim, with this fair play and everything like that, I've got to ask this question: is that everybody's blaming Mesut Ozil for the reason why we can't buy anybody? But if Mesut Ozil was to be sold, to bring in the next superstar, you're going to have to pay him top money. So once Mesut Ozil goes, someone else is going to, is it going to be Aubameyang that's going to get that contract or someone else? So it's a vicious circle. So how are we going to get off of this fair play merry-go thing and move on?
Well, that's really about wage bill management. Arsenal's wage bill, amazingly, given that they seem to get worse every year, still manages to go up. Last year, I think it was about 250 million in wages. Of course, they've now spent about 25 million pounds over 2 years in sacking 2 lots of managers and all their support staff. That's another way that you lose money. The Ozil salary is extraordinary in its scale, but you're right. If you sign a world-class player, you're probably paying 200k plus a week, whereas I think Ozil's is over 300, close to 350. So it's huge. But you could say the even bigger scandal is Mkhitaryan on 220k.
Yeah, it's not even here.
Player. That was because they screwed up the Sanchez situation and then dealt with the super agent there, Manola. And so on and so on. Arsenal need to get that wage bill under control. It's, our wage bill is a lot closer to Liverpool than it is to Spurs.
Blimey. Dan, I want to bring you back in there, mate. You've been very patient there. Sorry now.
Sure.
Your latest blog, sell players or no transfer budget. Would you like to explain that blog for us?
Well, I think I just actually want to touch on something Kevin said, actually.
Yeah, absolutely.
Which I think is very important. And Kevin mentioned earlier, you've got to have a plan. And I feel that Arsenal Kroneke can have a rights issue or he can refinance debt. But at the end of the day, in Arsene Wenger's last 5 seasons, he spent 368 million. And Arsenal have been going downhill throughout that period. And you could argue that the only 2, in inverted commas, world-class players we managed to attract was Alexis Sanchez and Aubameyang. So had Wenger spent that money wisely and delivered on his promises, we wouldn't be talking about Kronke's self-sustaining model. And if you look at Manchester United, for example, since Ferguson left, they've spent 968 million on players, which is 250 million more than Ferguson spent in the whole 27 years he was there. So throwing money at the problem is not the solution. Kroneke could throw 200, 300 million at the problem. Well, he can't actually, because we already discussed financial fair play. He would fall foul of that. But the other problem, of course, is United can spend that money because their income dwarfs Arsenal. Their turnover, their commercial income dwarfs Arsenal. If Arsenal were to spend that sort of money, they'd probably go bust. So I think we really need to focus not on how much money we're generating. Can we generate more and more? Can we give Arteta 200 million, 300 million, find out a way to do that? But how is the money being spent? And as Kevin said, is there a plan? What is the plan? Yeah. And if you look at, I think one team in particular is a very interesting, is Leicester City. Because as we know, in 2015-16, they won the Premier League with an expenditure on players, just the first team, of 29 million. Now, you can say that's an anomaly, that's a one-off, that will never happen again, and maybe you're right. The next season, they finished 12th. The season after, they finished 10th. Last season, they finished 10th. And here we are 4 years later, Leicester are third, right behind Man City. They've only got 2 players from that title-winning team, Schmeichel and Vardy, and they've spent 154 million pounds in that 4-year gap. And there they are again in the top 3, right behind Man City and Liverpool, who are having this incredible season. I think ordinarily Leicester will be in another title race, and yet they've spent about as much money as Arsenal spent in their last window, if I'm correct. In the summer window, I think Arsenal spent about 147 million. So I think we really need to move away from the amount of how we can generate. I know unfortunately we're in a situation now where the financial situation has worsened because we've been out of the Champions League for so long, and income's dropped from all avenues. We are in a very tricky situation in terms of finances, but I really think we're going to have to focus on more towards the plan. What's the plan? And that's going to be absolutely critical now over the next 3 years. I mean, we can talk about Adidas deals, but I mean, at the moment, the benefits of that will be cancelled out if Arsenal don't make Europa League next season. I mean,
yeah, well,
it's cancelled out.
Yeah,
because I think for a team like Arsenal to get to the quarterfinals, I mean, it's all seeded, isn't it? So it's pretty easy for Arsenal to get to the quarterfinals of the Europa League, and you're probably going to earn 25 to 30 million just from doing that alone. So if you're not actually even in Europa League, and I must say at the moment that's touch and go. That's more money get down the drain, less money in the summer to spend. And I think that all these equations are part of why I've written that blog. I just feel that we're in a situation now, because I know the club probably is looking to I don't know if Tim agrees, but maybe post a loss for 2018-19 of around 50 million. And I just don't see where the transfer spend's going to come from this summer unless we sell players.
Tim, do you want to come in on that? I mean, if we don't qualify for the Europa League this year, and like Danny rightly said, I can't see us qualifying for the Europa League this year. I can't see us, people are saying we can still get in the Champions League by winning the Europa League. But as much as I love the Arsenal, I can't see us winning the Europa League either, and getting into the Champions League that way.
Because there's not that much quality in it. And we are in seeding, we are the number 1 seeds in the tournament.
Okay.
Although, of course, the seeding is based on a 5-year average, and anyone who's watched us the last 6 months might say, "Hang on a second."
Yeah.
But it's a chance. I'd say there's more chance of winning the Europa League than there is coming 4th, 5th in the Premier League, because the quality of what's around. But yeah, if we don't make any European competition, that is close to financial meltdown for Arsenal, because that's take 40 million out of where they are now. So that's not even stand still. That's go backwards. That's fire sale territory for next year.
So, Kevin, let's bring you back in on this one. Not qualifying for the Europa League next year, as Tim said and as Dan said, financial dire straits. So next year, then, as an Arsenal fan, what's going to happen?
If we're honest, if all of us are honest, it's been coming. It's been getting steadily worse over year after year after year. And when you can't get back into that Champions League after the first season out, second season out, now the third season out. If we don't qualify this season by hook or by crook, I can't see it happening in the league. So it has to be in the Europa League. That's the only thing that's going to save the football club. Because if we don't win it, Aubameyang's not going to stay. Lacazette's going to go. Ozil's going to have to go. Well, probably all of them's going to have to go, and it's going to have to be a level, probably 2 or 3 choices that we recruit. That's the way it's going to have to be. And yeah, Arsenal are a huge club, of course they are, but the mentality isn't huge. The football club's mentality has been a disgrace as far as I'm concerned. And that's why I mentioned about a plan. Because there's no plan in place in order to get the club going, to get the better players in to qualify for the Champions League, which we could have done 5 years ago, 4 years ago, 3 years. We could have done it, have that going. We're going to have to feel some pain now. And I believe the pain's going to come in the summer. I really do.
Kevin, would you agree with me saying, I've always said this to Lee, that I feel like I've supported 2 clubs. I feel like I've supported the Arsenal at Highbury, and I feel like I support a completely different club now since we've moved to the Emirates.
Yeah, I think that, Craig, comes with the actions of the board. The actions of the board. You know, when we left Highbury, at Highbury, we were a club who were forward-thinking and we were looking to win things. Then we got bamboozled with the narrative that we've got to pay the stadium off. You know, finishing in the top 4 will keep us competitive. Which Arsene Wenger done a great job when you think about it, keeping us there. But for the last probably, as I say, 10 to 12 years, we've steadily been in decline. We haven't invested in the right places. And I'm going to mention this. The recruitment of players has been appalling. Absolutely appalling. So what tends to happen is, if you can find gems, great. But if you buy players who are on the up, young players who are on the up, you bring them in, you develop them, then they're worth more money if you were to move them on. But Arsenal never done that. The players that were in the club.
This is what we were supposed to do, though, wasn't it? Project Emirates. Yeah.
Well, we were supposed to do that. But when you look at the actual recruitment of some of these players, and then you hear, we could have got this player for little money, that player for little money. It's no point even mentioning the names. But Arsenal never done it. Why? Because they just never had the plan, or the recruitment team were aggressive enough to go and get them. So we're going to get what we deserve right now. And all the usual suspects have gone from the club. The ones who really got us into this position moving forward, they've gone. So now these guys now have to pick up the pieces. That's why Arteta is going to have to develop youth, because I think that's the way it's going to have to go.
I think you're right, mate. I've got a question, Tim, that's coming from Gunnar Russ. Thanks, Gunnar. Thanks, Russell, for your question, mate. Tim Russ wants to know: with us making such a large loss last year, make Kroneke cut. Would this make Kroneke cut his losses? Sorry, will us making a large loss last year make Kroneke cut and run if the club loses value again?
No, because the club. The club isn't losing value. The club is worth more and more because of the media rights.
Yeah.
Because it's part of the Premier League. Now, it's getting a bit dicier for them, but I can tell you what worries Stan Kroenke. It isn't, are Arsenal going to have a better team next Saturday? It's, is there going to be a European Super League, and how do I get Arsenal in it? Because that's where the revenues come from. At the moment, they are stitching up behind the scenes a kind of bigger European Super League. Some of the proposals for it are awful. Some are just bad. It sounds like at the moment what they're going to do is make those group stages in the autumn bigger. But you know why? Because if you have bigger group stages, that's more games to charge fans for tickets, and that's more games to charge TV revenue. You'll still go into the final 16. You'll just have to sit through interminable group stage games, and they'll probably do the same with the Europa League. But that's what worries Stan Kroenke, and the value's going up and up, because more people around the world want to watch the Premier League. And the problem is, if Arsenal come, I don't think they want to come sixth. I think their business model, their ideal business model, is come fourth. Because if you come fourth, you get all the Champions League money without having to really stretch to come first. There used to be the old joke, didn't there, about clubs in League Two that didn't want promotion to League One because the bonuses in the contracts would be bigger than like what they were earning. So it's kind of like a version of that. But I'm sad to say, was it to Russ? He ain't going to let Arsenal go. Look at the projected growth of revenue for the TV rights domestically and internationally. He's not letting Arsenal go. No, sadly.
I must say, I find that rather depressing because I was hoping we could have some room for optimism at some point in this discussion, but Tim's knocked that on the head, really, talking about the African media rights and things like that, opening that up because obviously, if there is a £50 million loss this year reported, the next year is not likely to be much better considering.
Well, the way you deal with that, as Kev said, is you deal with that loss by no longer having Mesut Ozil or on the wage bill. But then, if you can't replace them, then you're right. You've got to start doing it with kids and youngsters. But I partly wonder, Kev, I'm almost quite excited by that because you've talked about the attitude. And I think some of these overpaid prima donnas and their attitude, they've taken it all for granted.
Yeah,
and when you get given a 4-year contract at 350k a week, you know, I'm a cynic. You can tell I'm a natural cynic. But he played quite well for a few weeks before that contract renewal, and ever since then, he's enjoying his his playboy lifestyle in London.
Tim,
are you worried?
I've got to ask the question though. I'm with you on this. You know what I mean? Like, let's get rid of the big superstars and let's start again and let's play the youth players and all that. But is Stan Kroneke then going to turn around to you, to me, and to whoever goes season ticket? I'll tell you what, we're now relying the season tickets to every other supporters are. You know, like for instance, we're on the same at this moment in time. We're on the same level as Burnley. To watch the game against Arsenal last week cost them £20. That's what it took for, you know what I mean? Like, we're paying £90 to £100. They're not going to cut that down, are they? They're going to turn around and say, right, we're going to get rid of Aubameyang, we're going to get rid of Sancho, but you're still going to be paying your top season price. What they said 13 years ago. Now, when I first started going,
there's some truth in that, Lee. But also, I don't know about you, but I'm actually more excited watching Martinelli at the moment than I am.
All right, without a doubt.
I feel like in a way it's more exciting to watch a youngster coming through who's up for it and plays with some passion, and you can see the talent coming.
Exactly. As I say, when I look at the program, you know, the team sheet now, as long as Saka and Martinelli are in it, I'm not bothered.
They're fantastic to watch, aren't they? You feel up for it because you feel part of their journey.
The thing is now, which is, you know, like when I first started watching Arsenal, I never ever dreamt that we'd win a league. You know what I mean? I looked at it, you know, it was like Liverpool winning it, Notts Forest, Aston Villa. We was never ever thought we was going to get to that stage. And then George Graham come along with a bunch of young players that were hungry and changed the face of me being an Arsenal fan to what I am now.
But also, he didn't just come along with a bunch of young players. He cleared out some overpaid prima donnas.
Exactly. That's right.
You know,
exactly.
I don't want to make him blush, but you know, over time we saw hungry youngsters come in who'd come up through the youth system, and there were others, weren't there? He cleared out several.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. So I think that's where we're going to come into that stage now. It's a sort of a big cycle now. I think that we're going to have someone to do that.
Lee, guys, and what George Graham done, he recruited properly. Brought Nigel Winterburn in. He brought Lee Dixon, and he brought Steve Bold. Not for big money, and nobody really knew. We knew about Nigel, but we didn't know too much about Steve Bold and Lee Dixon. But he knew what he wanted, could fit around Tony Adams as the leader of that back four, and he could do something with them because he realised, I've got boys who can do bits up front. He went and bought Alan Smith, didn't he? As well, from Leicester. Yeah. And that was... Sorry?
Well, I do agree with you, although I think there's a big difference with the way the game is now. And that's that back then, it was actually much more financially balanced. If you were shrewd, if you worked hard on your transfers, if you had a good team coming through.
Tim.
That's what we've got to do now. But let me look at the threat to get back.
But Tim, hold on. you say that, and a lot of people say that, it's changed now. It hasn't changed. The game is about good players who are committed to what they do. You can't tell me Sheffield United are in a better financial position than Arsenal and got better players than Arsenal.
Of course.
But yet they're higher than us at the table. Leicester haven't got better players than us.
Yeah.
Yet they're higher than us. Most of the teams who are above Arsenal haven't got better players than Arsenal. So what is it?
Well,
I think Leicester's a good point in case as well, because as I said earlier, they've actually done it twice, and 140 million, which they spent to be where they are now. Obviously George Graham's era was 30 years ago. So it's really sort of equivalent to that, really, isn't it? With inflation and everything, they're actually, by comparison, they're spending very little money and actually proving that it can
getting more out of it.
Exactly.
Yeah. The best comparison financially, though, unfortunately, is the guys up the road.
Yeah,
because that's in some ways that's a much more consistent model. And, he ran out of steam, but Pochettino was probably the most successful manager over 5 years with what he had to spend, because he was doing it on a wage bill about £100 million a year less than us. He was doing it with a net transfer spend smaller than us. And, I think he's the best comparator. And then Leicester, I would agree. But Arsenal should be coming fourth, fifth with their resources. But what they've really got to watch out for, and is this me being too pessimistic, but to get back to the top, oh my God, is that hard? Because Liverpool are so well run, and look at that squad. United, we know to a certain extent, it's almost like, sooner or later, they have to get it right, don't they? The amount of money. City won't go away. Usmanov gave up on Arsenal and is basically putting his money into Everton, where, they're building a new stadium, and they will get there as well. Then Spurs have got all the revenue coming from this stadium. They might have a wobble, but they are now in effect on a par. So the challenge was, 15 years ago, we were at a stage where basically it was only Arsenal and Manchester United. They had a clear example. Now we've got to fight with 6 or 7. And my fear is it can become institutionalised. And before you know it, you'll know what I mean. You're more like a Newcastle rather than an Arsenal of old, whereas a good season is coming 5th and a bad season is coming 10th, rather than a good season being coming 1st and a bad season being coming 5th. And I think we've got one hell of a fight, given the ownership, the board, how we're set up, not to sit between 5th and 10th for the next few years.
It sounds like to me that Stan Kroneke has put a lot of faith into the recruitment drive. Obviously, what Dan tells us there, or Dan and Tim have told us there about not qualifying for Europe this year will probably be a £50 million loss straight away.
But I would say here, I keep, it's boring. I say it's about the governance. Who is spending that money? Now, of course, it's been a little bit of turmoil because you've kind of gone from that situation of Wenger having complete control. Then they brought in the sort of scouts then Raul got brought in. Raul wasn't brought in. He's not a football man. Everyone talks about him like he's a football man. He was basically Barcelona's agent. He worked for Nike before. I think his number one reason that he was brought in was he was the prime mover behind the European Super League. And his job was to keep Arsenal as close to it as possible. He ended up in charge because Ivan left, which surprised everybody. He changed Arsenal's decision to appoint Emery and then stuck with him too long. He worked for the Super a bit longer to see if he's right. But I tell you, I'm far from convinced and very nervous that he seems to have all the power. There's no one in the Arsenal boardroom. It is about what you spend, but who is there as the check and balance and making sure it's spent well?
Exactly, that is it. Who is accountable for all this rubbish that's being kept? That is dead right. And realistically, the transfer that going into the buys that have been made over the last sort of 2 years and all that, as Kevin said, have been absolutely shocking. Someone's got to be accountable for that. Well, a lot of people got on the back of it, we never spent the Iwobi money, which come in at the last day of the season.
Well, that stops the loss being so big.
Exactly. So
and another thing, Lee, what I want to know is why this lad Mislintat we brought in, he was gone 3 weeks. No, you're all right, mate. Packed his desks and left.
Well,
Raul
Raul got rid of him because that was like a power struggle.
Yeah.
Gazidis would have almost been the referee and the senior person. Remember something else that changed that worries the AST a little bit? Ivan Gazidis did sit on the board. Raul Sanelli hasn't been put on the board, nor has Vinay Benechka. We're the only club that hasn't got an MD. We've got two. I'm not sure that really works. I always think one person should hold the power and the accountability. I know Vinay a little bit. I think he's a good, steady guy on the commercial side. But we haven't even got a clear leader there. But neither of them were put on the board. What? Who exactly is in charge? Is it Stan Kroneke? Is it Josh Kroneke? Is it Raul? Is it Keswick and Pryor? We do know that Raul blocked David O'Leary being added to the Arsenal board. And I think that's because he didn't actually fancy having a check and balance around.
Yeah. He got fitted up. We've been fitted up long time ago. We've been fitted up.
From this discussion, Lee, because we're going to wrap it up in a minute, because I know people have got other things to do, the busy men. But from this discussion, Lee, do you still feel it's all down to Stan Kroneke? We can all go down marching down the road. Kroneke out. We want Kroneke out, right?
Listen,
but
it starts.
Are we protesting? Are we protesting against the right? I'm not saying we're going to protest, but I'm saying are the voices that we are hearing now? Is it a waste of breath?
It starts with the head. You know what I mean? Like as Russ says, you know what I mean. If you've got a problem with the head, you don't cut the tail off. You know what I mean? Like, and that's what we've been doing far too often. He has let all this go on. He is the one, and I do believe that he's let this all out because he does not care like all of us on here now. He doesn't care. You know what I mean? Like I'm a results-driven supporter. You know what I mean? If Arsenal have won, I'm happy. If we lose, I've got the ump. You know what I mean? Like, I just want to see Arsenal be successful. And what we're saying here at this moment in time, we're not going to be. And what I was, as a fan, sold a dream of moving to this stadium and going to be this wonderful football club. Well, it's not happened. And, the AST, Timothy, you've lost a little bit of power because of all of this as well. Like, you know what I mean? You haven't got the say that you used to have.
Well,
so
we haven't got the shareholding. So
exactly, you know what I mean? So the fans...
we embarrassed him to stop taking the £3 million payment out, basically at the AGMs.
Yeah.
Tough questions and people basically laughing at the answers and not being happy. Yes, a little. It was a tiny bit of influence, but even that was squeezed out.
Yeah, it was a fantastic from a fan from afar. It was great to see that we was getting some sort of accountability. That's gone now, and it starts with him. I at the end of the day look at it and he has allowed all these things to happen. And as Tim has quite rightly said, it's not going to affect him in the long run because he's still going to make his money. You know what I mean? So it doesn't matter to him if we win, lose or draw. It doesn't matter because at the end of the day, if it comes to the crunch, he can get out and he'll earn money. And that is the problem.
Value, Lee, it's about
the value, exactly. But for me, it's about winning trophies and those great days. And what I'm watching now is I am going to the Arsenal now, and this is how I see it. I'm paying West End prices to watch a Village show. That is what I'm doing week in, week out, and it's not acceptable. And there's nothing I can do about it. And you get people turning around and saying, "Well, don't go no more. Don't do this. This club's been ingrained in me since I was a kid, since my dad took me and everything. There, it's so hard. It's not easy to just say, right, I'm not going to walk away. I can't do it.
Not that simple.
It's not that simple. But for him, it is. He can walk away tomorrow, and it won't affect him. And this is the problem. I love the club, but am I in love with the club like I was back in the day? No. And do you know what? There's no difference between when I first started supporting Arsenal was 70, 77, 76, but really started getting into it 81, 82. We was awful. It was an awful team, but it wasn't about that. It was about the Arsenal, about everything that was. It was about going to Highbury. It was about the red and white shirts. It was about all that. It wasn't about money. I didn't even know who owned the club. I didn't care. But now I do because everything is being. I feel like I've been, because I'm an Arsenal fan. I feel like they're just robbing me and there's nothing I can do about it. They pull my pants down every Saturday, slap my bum, and then and next week I've got to do it again, and there's nothing I can do about it. And the frustration, that's why you're getting people on the terraces being frustrated now, because there's nothing we can do about it.
I think you've echoed plenty of supporters there, Lee. So, I mean, look, there was a good question there now that came in. I've lost it now. Sorry, in the chat, it came in from someone. Like, I mean, if Stan Kroenke woke up in the morning and said, right, there's $1 billion, and we invested poorly and we finished out the top 4, who do we blame then, Kevin?
One, he wouldn't invest $1 billion.
Yeah, I know, but let's hear say.
It's a hypothetical. It's a hypothetical question. Now,
all right, then let's say tomorrow he wakes up and he says, right, there you go, there's 300 million. Get us in the top 4.
Well, what you do, can I come in there? What you do is you hold the people to account who spent the money.
Exactly.
I personally think that Raul Sanelli should be on very thin ice now.
Should be sacked him. Should be sacked.
Well, if you were ruthless, maybe. Let's go through 2 or 3 of the things over the last year. A year ago, he was saying no one would go beyond 2 years of a contract to go because they lose their value. Now we've got Aubameyang going past the 2 years, heading into the final year. Why did that happen on his watch? But more importantly, he was the one that changed people's minds to appoint Emery. But even more critically, he was the one that stuck with him far too long and in many ways wrote off this season. They were convinced they could hang on to him for the rest of the year. They saw that run of games, Southampton, Norwich, and so on coming up. And then they couldn't even get results on that. They were so unprepared, they stuck Freddie Ljungberg in, clearly out of his depth. I mean, he might be a great guy, but, he's only been in football coaching for a year. They gave him no support staff. Then they went back to the guy they'd been with originally, but probably 2 or 3 months too late. So, if money is spent and not spent well, you've got to hold to account the people who are spending it. But this is my problem at the moment. Are the 84-year-old, the 79-year-old and the 76-year-old holding Raul and maybe Edu now to account? My worry is not to the extent that they should be.
Yeah, exactly.
Totally agree. Totally agree.
I was talking about Leicester. Well, it might be modern football, but I think Leicester have had 4 managers in the last 4 years. They don't hang around.
Can I just add, guys, that
absolutely, mate. Come in,
far from it to be optimistic, because my blogs are typically not, unfortunately. But there is room, there is room for optimism in that I have seen a plan behind the scenes. Next season, Arsenal will have the youngest squad in the Premier League, if it's not already. I think next season it should be about 24.1 years old, the average age of the team we put out. And you do see now players coming through. William Saliba will be coming next in the summer. Kieran Tierney, 22. Guendouzi, 20. Torreira, 23. Saka, a fantastic prospect at 18.
Absolutely, yeah.
Nketiah, 20. Martinelli, 18. So I don't think that's an accident. I think there is a plan there.
That's a very good point, that, mate. Yeah.
And they are remodelling the club. But obviously, you could take the route of buying players, expensive players. And if you do that job well, you can have an instant impact. But these young players will take time to grow and mature, obviously. And maybe we have to rethink, under the circumstances, how we think about the club, and get behind that strategy, because we don't really have much choice other than protesting against Kronke. I mean, Lee, you mentioned earlier, and I empathise with you. There's no point unfortunately, there's no point complaining if you're not prepared to take action. And unfortunately, that means not going to games and not buying merchandise. But for a supporter as passionate as you are, as I've seen on AFTV and with your chats with Kevin, I appreciate how difficult that is. And but I think I remember a few years ago, a lot of people said, well, I'm not throwing away my season ticket, because if I do, I won't be able to, somebody else will take my place, and I won't be able to get another one again. But I think that myth's been busted a little bit, because we're now seeing every game 7,000 or 8,000 empty seats. So I think there is a case for, if we really do feel that Kronke is damaging the club, even though I've specified why I think he's actually given Arsenal the money they need to do a good job. But if we do feel that way, then we need to really mobilise and I assure you, not turning up at the ground, not buying merchandise, not buying tickets is extremely damaging for the brand, and that would make him think twice.
Oh yeah, Tim. Look, I mean, it's coming there. Tim,
Craig,
yeah,
I want to answer your question.
Go for it.
You asked me if Kroneke gave 300 million, and we didn't do anything, what would happen? I'm of the ilk. We've got the type of manager now that would pick players not based on reputation,
yes,
but based on one, can they do the job and fit in, and two, can they fit into the system he wants to play? Because let's be brutally honest, he's inherited these players who have failed with 2 managers, 3 managers. They've failed. All of a sudden, he's starting to get a tune out of some of them, but we know they're not good enough.
I think Arteta is the best manager to have taken over where Dan says about this average age thing. I think Arteta is the best manager to have taken us over now with the youth that we have in our team.
He's still got to be back, though, hasn't he? He's still got to have other players around him.
Lee, but here's the thing. If people think buying £100 million players is what Arsenal need to do, they're deluded.
Absolutely, mate. Thank you.
It is not going to happen.
Of course it isn't. You just called him.
What he needs to do, he needs to buy players who can fit into his system. It doesn't matter if they cost 2 million or 20 million. He's got to buy players that fit into his system. The midfield has not really been balanced and functional properly yet. Even with Torreira and Xhaka in there, we need players in there who are fit and who can do the job of pressing and etc. We need wide players who can beat players, because at the moment we're fitting Martinelli in, we're fitting Aubameyang in, Pepe in 72 million ain't even playing. So what's the point? And Lacazette's having a nightmare at the moment.
Kevin, can I just ask you one question? I agree with everything you said there, but if Arteta's looking towards the future, what's Ozil doing in the team, and what's he offering?
Well, can I play devil's advocate to that a bit? I mean, we've had that question before while we're on the podcast. I mean, why is he playing Mesut Ozil? Because who else is there? Who, if he drops Mesut Ozil, who comes into that position?
Well, I'd play somebody that has at least potential, because Ozil's not going to get better. Willock might get better, and I actually think Willock would offer more. At the very least, he could press the opposition and stop teams playing out from the back. But Ozil, I really can't see any. I just cannot see what he's
a little bit like. I've got to say, the Mesut Ozil situation. Me and Kevin have spoke about it. It's a little bit like the Charlie Nicholas situation. Like, you know what I mean? Give him a year. You know what I mean? And then, you know, the contract runs down a little bit more, and you can get rid of him, I suppose, on something like that. You know, by the way, I love Charlie Nicholas a lot more than I did Mesut Ozil. You know what I mean? But I honestly think that. I think we've got. I don't know how I think every Arsenal fan has been impressed with what they've seen with Arteta. I certainly have. You know what I mean? Like, I'm going to be honest. I was thinking it was a cheap option. Blah 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 blah. But what I've seen of him, I've been very very impressed. But you know, if he's got to bring in players, he's got to get rid of players. So he's got to be allowed to do that, and he needs the backing of the board, you know, to be able to do that. And as Tim has said, you know what I mean, an 84-year-old, a 64 or whatever, that ain't going to do it.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like,
absolutely.
It's got to have the proper people in proper places to make this happen. Now, that starts with Kroneke. Kronke's the one that's got to do it. You know, I want to see this Josh Kroneke. When's he going to come back out and say, well, there was a little bit of steam put onto him, a little bit of pressure put onto him at the beginning of the season, let's be excited. So when is he going to come out and turn around and say, well, I'm sorry he wasn't excited, but this is how we're going to do it, this is how we're going to do it. We haven't heard from him. Haven't heard from him.
And that makes a massive difference as well. Do you know? I mean, at least if he came out and said, you know, we've made a buck up.
We've made mistakes.
We've made mistakes. Yeah, and we're going to rectify it. Look, I'm not sticking up for Stan Kroenke in any way, shape, or form. I want him out as much as the next person. I want a more proactive boss. I want a more proactive owner. I want a man who knows about the game of football. You know, I want a man that wants to see Arsenal do well. This has not been a podcast in any support, well, just if supporters stand Kroneke, but we need to just be a little bit more educated, I think, on what we're talking about when it comes to, Kroneke this, Kroneke that. It's been an amazing podcast. We've lost, brilliant. We've lost Kevin there.
I need to get off as well.
Yeah. So I'm just going to finish off. I'll start with you, Tim. Many thanks.
Cheers, Tim. That's been amazing insight. Amazing. Thank you very much.
You're welcome. Thank you for inviting me on.
It's been absolutely amazing to have someone, such as yourself on there, and educating us. Really, we sit around every Monday as four lads and spout rubbish, but to have someone and come on and tell us the facts and stuff like that, it's been absolutely amazing. So thank you very much, Tim, and we hope to have you again. We hope to have you on again sometime. Thanks very much indeed.
Cheers, Tim. Thanks for that. Brilliant.
Cheers, Tim.
Fantastic insight from him there, to be honest. I've got to say that.
I couldn't believe that he actually. I mean, I've got to give a big, massive thank you to Russell. I know he's in the chat there. Thank you, mate, for. Russell laid the groundwork for that. Really, I see Russell tweeting him there the other day, and I said, "Well, do you know what? I wonder would he?" So I done a little reply, and there, if you don't ask, you don't get. He came on, gave us an hour of his time. To have someone like him on. It's been amazing, and of course,
it didn't fill me with a lot of optimism, though, Craig. I've got to say that.
You see, Lee, this is why I wanted to do it, because I feel that although you say that everything starts from the top, yes, it does, but I think that he can't be blamed for everything. He can't.
Me and Kevin touched it in Kevin's show the other day. I am worried that we're going to sell Aubameyang, we're going to sell Lacazette, and it's going to be Eddie up front with Martinelli and Pepe. You know what I mean? And as much as I like Eddie, people. I was there at Burnley the other day, and people were saying, "Oh, he's the new Ian Wright," and I had to turn around and say, "What? He's the new Ian Wright now?" You know what I mean? Because he's certainly not the Ian Wright of when he was, but like, this is my worry. You know what I mean? Like the talk about teenagers that I feel like, Nicholas Anelka was an exciting teenager that come through our ranks. You know what I mean? Like the standard of Arsenal supporters is waning, just like because we're being brainwashed. That's my problem.
But worry. Lee, you look at the quality. When Anelka was coming through, you look at the team he played in.
Yeah, you've got to be good to get into that team.
That was around him.
But is this going to happen again? Like, you think if we brought in Anelka, what do we buy Anelka for? Something like 750,000, or something silly like that. The next season, we sell him to Real Madrid for 20 million. Is this going to happen again? Is this,
It's been happening all the time, Craig.
But I mean, with Martinelli and with Guendouzi and Saka and, where are we going to, when it comes down to it, when it boils down to it, in 2 years' time, don't worry about next season. In 2 years' time, when these players have hopefully flourished, and clubs are going to be the Barca's, the Real Madrids, the Man Uniteds, the Man Cities, the Liverpools, they're going to come calling. Where does that leave us?
Well, you can't. Well, here's the thing, though, Craig. You can't worry about 2 years' time and forget next season. Because it's next season, if they're going to establish themselves in the Arsenal team, then you got to keep them.
But that's what I mean. In 2 years, they're going to be their heads are going to be turned.
But you've got to establish them first, and this is the difference. If they don't get established, the big teams will only.
But they're going to. But
they
then
take potential.
They're going to have to get established because we ain't going to have the players. I mean, if Aubameyang goes and Lacazette goes, and he goes and Ozil goes, they're going to have to get established because we've got no one else there.
But we'll buy players cheaper. That's what we'll have to do, because you can't think that these kids, you can rely on them all the time. You can't. It's impossible. No, you can't.
Yeah, I know what you're saying, but
what you have to do, you have to build because the environment and the culture at the club, that has been the most problem on the pitch and off the pitch as a squad. That's been the issue for 10 years.
Yeah.
And all the time we've heard Arsene Wenger and all these other managers say, we've got a great dressing room, we've got a great dressing room. when the chips were down and we had to fight, we never stood up. I've seen more fight in this Mikel Arteta team than I have done in
Good point.
5 or 10
Brilliant
years.
point.
Massive point. Yeah.
Brilliant
So
point.
for me, it's the culture. They've got to get the culture right. And if it means getting rid of the so-called superstars and getting lads in who are going to go off and work, I'll take that all day long.
Yeah. I'm with you, Kevin. I'd find it much easier to support. That's the word I'm looking. I would find it much easier to feel. What's the word I'm looking for? Inspired by watching a club like that, by watching a team like that on the pitch, than I am at the moment. Danny, where can people find your blog, mate? It's now time to plug it. It's now time to.
Just type in Arsenal Truth and it will magically appear.
If you type in Arsenal Truth into Google, I typed into Google, why won't Stan Kroneke invest in Arsenal? And your blog came up top result.
Really?
So there you go. Your
and you're
Twitter
a good speaker
handle,
as well, Dan.
you are very good.
You're a good speaker as well. Like, you know.
Thank you.
We'll definitely be having you on again if you're up for it.
Mm-hmm. Yes, certainly.
We can find you on Twitter. So everyone in the chat box, where can we find you on Twitter?
Just Arsenal Truth Twitter.
So is it, what's the handle? Is it at Truth Arsenal, isn't it?
I'm not sure. I'll have to have a look. I can't remember.
I think it's at Truth Arsenal.
Right.
So everyone who's listening, please go over and follow Danny on Twitter, and of course have a look at his blog. It's been a pleasure having you on here, mate. Thank you very much. Thanks for agreeing to come on in such short notice.
Yeah,
I know everyone's busy and stuff, so thank you very much.
Can I also say what an honour it is to be on with Kevin Campbell as well, because when I was a youngster,
not me, Dan.
No, you two, Lee, because I love your enthusiasm as well on AFTV. It's fantastic. But when I was in the North Bank, I grew up watching Kevin and all the lads. That was my era. So it's been delightful to share this space with you, Kevin, as well as you other two guys.
Listen, you're welcome, and I've just followed you at Truth Arsenal. There you go.
Legend. Thank you.
There you go. And of course, our thanks, sincere thanks to, he's our mate now, really, isn't he? You know, there's no point calling him Arsenal this and Arsenal that. Kevin Campbell, thank you very much for coming on again, mate. It's been an absolute honour, as Dan says, to have you on here.
Listen, my pleasure. And
even though we're mates now and all that, you know.
No, but usually I don't get the opportunity to do a Friday because I'm travelling. But
you got a day off?
No, I don't go today. I go tomorrow.
Oh, right.
Because they play on Sunday.
Do you know what I'd love to do? If you could make it happen? You know, like everyone knows, most of the people know now that I'm a goalkeeper from a young age.
He's going to ask to have a little chat, Badgie.
I'd love to get him on here and just talk to him about times gone by and what he used to get up to. And
talk to him about modern football. You want to hear his thoughts on.
Well, do you know what, Kevin? If you could have a word with him, I would love to have him on here to talk about modern football. You got me a really nice message from him. I was running absolutely delighted with that because I can remember being when I was a young fella. My uncle we used to watch a lot of Ipswich Town games as well, and I was at Portman Road one afternoon. It was a 4-4 draw between Newcastle and Ipswich, old second division. And I'm talking Mickey Quinn scored a hat-trick for Newcastle that day.
Right.
And John Burridge was in goal for Newcastle. And, all right, he conceded 4, but by Christ, he stopped Ipswich.
He saved about 20.
Oh, yeah. And I can remember, you know, when I said that he was one of my goalkeeping heroes, he really is. Because ever since that day, I was like, who is this bloke? You know, he was walking around on his hands and doing all absolutely brilliant. So
iconic, wasn't he, back in the day? He was an iconic goalkeeper.
Absolutely. You talk about legends, right? But he is an unsung legend of the game. He really is.
And he's still the oldest player to play in the Premier League.
Is he really? And who was that for?
That was for Man City.
Man City. Get on that.
Yeah, that's a good question, isn't it?
43, I think he was. 43 something.
Blimey. Have a word with him, Kev.
I'll have a word.
See if we can get him on. Yeah, have a word. I'll give him a $5.
No problems.
And of course, my last and sincere thanks to Mr. Judges. I hope you enjoyed that, mate.
Look, you know, it was an insight. You know, I mean, it's not the greatest.
It wasn't, was it? You know, I'm coming away, and I'm still, you know, The title of the podcast is
The
Stan
thing,
Kroenke.
the one point that Tim made, which is a great thing, is that he can invest in getting rid of the debt. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
And
that is a very good point. Yeah,
that was a fantastic point. So there's no excuses. If he wants to, like, you know, when people turn around now and say, "Oh, we can't invest," he can by that route. And until he does, as far as I'm concerned, he ain't for me.
Yeah. Well, he's not for me either. But I just don't like. He's not for me either. But I just don't like when people don't read up on stuff. You know, I mean, like I've got pages and pages and pages of it here.
No. I just look at that league table. That's all I need to look at.
Well,
and it ain't good bloody reading.
Yeah,
that's
true.
That's how I feel about it.
True, but I'm the host of the podcast.
No, I know you're very professional.
Yeah,
I'm not.
I just don't think as much as I don't like him, and I don't like him as much as the next bloke. I just don't think that everything that's going on at Arsenal, in my personal opinion, is absolutely down to him. So, yeah. Lads, thank you very much for staying and watching. I hope you enjoyed this bonus episode of the Same Old Arsenal podcast, brought to you by the West Cork Beard Company. Link down in the description. Anyone got a beard on tonight? No, Kevin, you ain't got one. Danny, you got a beard?
No.
Nah. All right.
I just shaved today, because
we'll have to wait till I get Harry and Dan. I'll have to wait till I get Harry and Dan back on. International break next week, so we won't see you on Monday. We'll see you the following Monday.
Winter break, so you can read all your papers, and it's a winter break. You know,
winter break. We're going to have a week off as well. I'm actually going away for the weekend with my kids and my wife. So
lovely.
We're going to have a weekend off until we see you soon, or until we see you again soon. Take care of yourselves and each other.
Goodbye. Have a great weekend.
Down you Gunners.
Up the
See you
Arsenal.
later. Come on, you Gunners.